If ever there was a natural for then and now, it's Dan McLeod. He spent half of his life as editor of the Georgia Strait, Canada's best-known underground newspaper. Despite being a very devoted father of two, Dan has been charged for obstructing police and printing obscene material, but he's generally famous for leading the Georgia Strait through the turbulent 60s and 70s in Vancouver. One of his most famous employees is Bob Geldof, who wrote music reviews. Dan's fights with City Hall, and particularly Mayor Tom Campbell, are legendary. But the best testimony to Dan McLeod is that every one of his detractors is gone, and he's still here.
We started as an arts magazine, and I was a poet coming out of writing poetry. And then all of a sudden, I noticed people getting busted on the streets just for hanging around on the streets with long hair. And I got really upset about that people would use this law, the police would use this law, vagrancy, to tell people you have 24 hours to get out of town. And so I would go up, you know, even when they were in the middle of busting somebody, and I had a tape recorder, and I'd put my tape recorder in there and try to record this and write a story about it, you know, and then of course I would be busted in the act of doing it, you know.
Were you by nature a troublemaker?
Well, I didn't like to be told what to do, essentially. It was a reaction to being told, no, you can't do that. And I wanted to publish a free press, and yet I was told I couldn't do that. And I thought we had free press in this country. I was pretty naive. And, I tried to actually do it, and I found when you actually try and do it, see, I believe you don't have a freedom unless you use it. You know, that it's no use having a free press if nobody's publishing a free press. And so I was trying to actually do it, and yet, so I was, in a way, pioneering, showing the boundaries of what you can and can't do.
When you look back at what you wrote about in those days, those times, does it now seem outlandish, some of the editorials and things that were done?
Well, it fit the times, but things were very wild. The paper isn't that format anymore, but that format was a free press format where we allowed anything and everything. People could say the wildest things in the paper, and they did, and that got us, made us a lot of enemies in the city, and it got us a reputation for being kind of crazy, and we were at that time.
Well, the council isn't prepared to censor the Georgia Strait. The license inspector suspended the license for gross misconduct, and that's something you can't clean up. I don't think that these are the type of people that we want publishing papers in Vancouver.
I only met him once when I served him with a summons, and his dog bit my leg.
Although the change was subtle, in the 80s, the Georgia Strait went from a music focus to one of films.
For the first 10 years or so, we were just trying to have fun with it, and we were just doing it, and we weren't trying to make money from it. Then we decided about 10 years ago that we wouldn't be able to continue and have fun with it unless we had a paper that existed economically and viably. I remember being backstage with Jim Morrison of The Doors and Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, but then you know, at some point, in the past 10 years, I decided that, you know, that the music was not going to be the path for us that would really work as well as the movies, because the record companies would not give us access to the top stars in the music world, and the movie companies did.
Any regrets?
No. It's been, you know, the mistakes that I may have made are part of learning, part of life.
You hold no grudges?
No. Although it'd be nice if Tom Campbell would start talking again. I'd like to hear what he has to say today.
During his long career, actor Bruno Gerussi's intense talent and dark ethnic good looks have landed him stage and television roles in such classics as Julius Caesar, Peer Gynt, and Galileo. We've watched him for the past 17 years in his role on the Beachcombers, and remember the fun he had hosting the series Celebrity Cooks. Bruno's career has been well documented. Most of us have enjoyed him on television for years, but little is known of his humble beginnings. Bruno, you were born in Medicine Hat. You moved to New Westminster.
Well, Medicine Hat,
Yeah.
left at 6 months of age, never to return.
Okay.
And my mother and father moved to a little town called Exshaw, where the Winter Games are being held, Canmore. So that's until I was 7 or 8 years old, then to here in New Westminster, British Columbia. Yeah.
You lived in a tiny little house in New Westminster on the banks of the Fraser River. What drove you to get out of there?
Well, my father was an extraordinary man, and we don't have enough time to go in, maybe another time, but he was a remarkable man who had to work. He was born in the wrong time, the wrong place, all of that. He was an extraordinary man with incredible talent. He was a musician, he could sing, he could paint, he could draw, all of that stuff. But he had to work. He was a stonemason and bricklayer, and I did it with him as a kid, and I still now do it as therapeutically. I love doing that stuff. But as I mentioned, I worked in the sawmills, you know, when I was 14 years old, when the pulp boat used to come into the Scott paper mill. Some of the kids that, you know, needed to work for about $1 an hour in those days. We'd go down and unload the boat, take an afternoon off. The school would let us take an afternoon off to earn a few dollars. So that, you know, and in the summertime I worked in the sawmills for 38 cents an hour when I was a kid. And I thought, God almighty, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life here. And I realized I had something, I had a kind of energy, whatever the hell it was. So all of those things, I said, I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life doing this. And in high school, a dear lady, two people actually, they saw something in me and they asked me to do a play, and I read this thing and I did it, and I won a scholarship to the Banff School of Fine Arts in 1946 or 47, and I was on my way. I knew that's what I was going to do, you know.
Speak hands for me.
You knew you had to go east.
The Stratford Shakespeare Festival was founded in the East in the early 50s, and I remember Tyrone Guthrie, who was then the artistic director. He took a fancy to me because I was different from the other. You know, I wasn't trained in the Shakespearean and the Mid-Atlantic and all that. I played the way I am, and the kind of energy, whatever I had, he liked. And I knew how to use the stage, you know. I come on, boom, you know. I knew I had that quality. So that was just learning, and learning with the best. And there's no better way to learn than when you're actually working with people on the stage in front of an audience.
Absolutely. Although Toronto offered lots of work, Bruno was lured back to Vancouver to his most successful and long-running role, that of Nick, the macho Greek in the widely syndicated TV series The Beachcombers. Another series, Celebrity Cooks, came about because of Bruno's love of cuisine. Each show featured a personality, cooking and sharing recipe secrets, and a little wine as well.
Stand back. 1, 2, 3, take off.
The most creative thing I've done in my life is to bring up two remarkable children. I mean, I devoted myself to that. When my wife died, I just said, okay, the three of us are going to do this. And now my son, who happens to be in the movie business, he's a fine musician, but he has 2 kids, and he and his wife, Patsy, who's one of Pierre Burton's daughters, they have 2 lovely kids. My daughter has two just remarkable children who are half Italian and half black, and they're just physically beautiful, and they've got the smarts from both races, and that's the most creative thing. And I look at my grandchildren, and I took something from my father and my mother, who were remarkable people, and somehow I was fortunate enough to extend that and to do things that my father was never able to do. So I feel very proud and fulfilled in life having done that, and I've passed that on to my children, and they've passed it on, and my grandchildren have it, and that's all what life is about. And to me, that's the most important thing.
Bruno's gearing up for his 18th season of The Beachcombers.
By the way, after 20 years, the Georgia Strait is moving downtown very shortly.
Oh, the big time.
Yep.
Up next, our address and Prism.
If you were to explain Prism's rise and fall and rise again, you'd have to go back to the late 60s and the Seeds of Time, which gave us Lindsay Mitchell and Rocket Norton, 2 lifelong buddies. When a band named Sunshyne, featuring Bruce Fairbairn and Jim Vallance, were offered a recording contract on the strength of several Vallance tunes, there wasn't a Sunshyne band left to record the album. So they grabbed Rocket and Lindsay, and the new Prism was born. They had a 5-year run at the top and were named Best Group at the 1981 Junos. Prism broke up and now, years later, have reformed with 2 new members, plus the always steady Al Harlow. I asked Rocket and Lindsay about their very first television appearance as the Seeds of Time.
It was the little studio in Georgia. We drove the truck sort of almost right into where the studio was, and they put a little X on the stage and said, "Don't move from that spot." You know, they had like one light coming out. And it was, yeah, that was fun. We were just talking about that. We were 17 and 18, I think. You could tell just by watching the video clip that, I mean, these guys were into it.
What is it that stopped Prism from getting that extra half an inch to the top? Because you certainly had the talent, you certainly had the songwriting, and you had the management.
Timing. Well, among several things, timing was very big, because in 1981-82, if you recall, I recall seeing the cover of Time magazine with a gravestone and R.I.P. on it, and it said the death of the music industry. And in that year, half the record companies in the world went bankrupt. The ones that stayed in business fired half their employees. The whole music industry just ground to a halt. And touring stopped, everybody stopped, and we didn't have the energy to keep going at that point. And we were tired, we were burned out.
Prism's lead singer was Ron Tabak. On Christmas Day 1984, he was riding his bike across town to see Al Harlow. He was either run off the road or hit by a car, and after a bizarre series of events which even a subsequent inquest couldn't unravel, he died on Boxing Day 1984 of a brain hemorrhage at Vancouver General.
Lindsay, Ron was a child of the 70s. Do you think he would have taken well to Prism 88?
Well, that's hard to say, but one thing that did come up when we played 86th Street recently, Ron's younger brother came by, and he has a young son named Ron, and he said it was fabulous. And he said that now he had something to show his young son Ron what Uncle Ronnie did.
I love the story about Lindsay, you walking into a bar in Kelowna and hearing Darcy and his band playing one of your tunes. And again, it happened last night in Nanaimo.
In the sound check, the band that played with us last night, they did Armageddon. It's in their repertoire.
That must be wild to hear another band doing the material.
Quite often they do it better than we do.
Watching you guys play at the 86th Street Music Hall, you looked like you were having a blast. It was a lot of fun. Why is it fun now for you?
It feels really good. We got a great chemistry of people. And we've got an opportunity to now enjoy sort of the... We worked really hard on Prism at a time when we were really tired and burnt out guys. We'd been on the road for about 15 years at the time. Now we're more relaxed, we sort of have a clearer head, and we're able to enjoy the experience as we go. And we haven't done that many shows yet, but every single one of them has been fun.
Prism have started the long road back to the top. We'll be following that story with interest in 88.
I promised you our address for your suggestions. It's Then and Now, Box 4600, Vancouver. We'd love to hear from you.
Next, I get Rick and Rick Scott.
And I'll talk with band leader Dal Richards, 88-year-old Ivan Acri of the Orpheum, and the always fascinating David Suzuki.
We got to go. We hope you enjoyed tonight's show. We close with Jack Card, Barney Potts, and Pat Morgan from the Some of Those Days. Good night, Lynn.
Good night, Terry. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Roll credits.
We sang love's refrain. We were a vaudeville team. Danced the whole night through. We had the greatest routine. Strolling Lover's Lane. We'd harmonize and doodly-doodly-doo. Give me the old soft shoe. I said the old soft shoe. A one, a two, a doodly-doodly-doo. Play me that old soft shoe, but nothing else will do. That's the dance we used to do. Just me and Mary Lou. That's the dance my darling used to do.